Hello, everyone. Comic Book Ketchup. Yes, you've heard the music. You know that music. If you're a comic book lover, you know why we're here today. We're here to talk comics. I'm here with some friends to talk about our favorite medium and way to consume stories. And so we have Kevin, we have Joshua, and I have one of my favorite shirts, Merry
Sithmas.
Sithmas,
Yeah,
everybody.
good stuff.
Yeah, Kevin and I were just talking before we got on the air about his nephew and niece are playing with lightsabers, old plastic lightsabers from way back in 1999 for the Phantom Menace. But back in my day, we would wrap a present and you have that long cardboard tube, and I would use that and pretend that is a lightsaber. That's how we play with toys back in the 1900s. That's what we did. But yeah, we're here to talk about comics and man, I tell you, I still I go back and forth with my love for comics. Sometimes it can be overwhelming because there's so much stuff out there, and what do you do? But man, and I have 50 boxes of comics, and I've been trying to weed through and sell some of those comics back to my comic shop, and just boil down all my comic book collection to just a handful of boxes. And that was my goal. Well, guess what? I own, instead of just boiling it down to a handful of boxes that I keep, I boiled it down to just a handful of boxes to sell back. So it's hard to let go of these comics and stories that I love so much, and I keep collecting. The main part I was doing that was like just to make room for more comics to collect and read. And so here we are. We're going to talk about some of our favorite comics we've read over the last month. And so Joshua, Kevin, let's hop into the lightning round.
Let's do it. Joshua, you want to go first?
Doesn't matter to me. I'm
You
trying to
hear that?
remember because we're doing lightning round a little bit different. Because usually we do like a bunch and we just try and do like real fast, and we're just doing one each this time, right?
Yeah. Just one thing you're geeking out on over the last couple months. Yeah.
That's hard. There's
We
too
got-
many.
I
Yeah.
know.
We
Well,
gotta
you
go back to
mentioned in-
old-fashioned lightning round next time.
Yeah, well, you
I think-
mentioned
did I mention Hades? Yeah,
You mentioned Hades. Yeah.
Yeah, man, I do love what's going on with the Hades comics right now. The writer is Elliot Callan. I might be saying that wrong, and the artist is Alessandro Rinaldi. Man, honestly, it's just a lot of fun. It's animated a lot like the old Disney stuff. To me, it looks a lot closer to the Hercules TV show that they released in the 90s as opposed to the movie.
Mhm.
The art style is just a little bit different. If you know what I'm talking about, you do, and if you don't,
Yeah.
sorry. But really, it's just Hades. He's scheming. He has a heist plan. He's getting together a team, and it's like the old Ocean's movies, but with Hades and other Greek myths. You have why can't I think the guy who flies too close to the sun? What's his name?
Icarus.
Yeah, Icarus is part of his crew, and he's just kind of a fool. He's like, I want real wings. These wings really aren't doing it.
Now
And
this
they
is
just keep
through
making jokes. It's great.
Dynamite Comics, right? And they're
Yeah,
doing like the
yeah.
Disney villains. They're kind of
Yeah.
they're profiling Disney villains from the classic movies or whatever.
Yeah, they started with
Dynamite Comics.
Scar, and you kind of get the Scar's point of view, but not the same stuff that happened in the movie, but stuff that was left out of the Lion King movie.
Right.
And I thought this was going to be similar, like happening at the same time in the movie. This is not during the Hercules movie at all. This is just its own separate event.
I mean,
And
that
it's
seems
pretty
like
cool.
some.
They did Maleficent too, but I'm tired of Maleficent, so I didn't check that one out.
I mean, to unpack, we present these stories, and that's kind of what comics do best, I think, is that you can fill in some gaps and tell some stories that you don't need a big TV budget or movie budget to do, so they can kind of go into the comics and sell the rights or let the IPs go to these comic book publishers to tell a greater story. There's a Mace Windu comic that's coming out by Mark Bernardin here in the new year, and yeah, like we always do, we want to see a big Mace Windu TV show or a movie or whatever. He hasn't shown up yet, but hey, you can tell a side story. What's his backstory? How did he grow up as a Jedi or not? You can tell that in the comics in a medium in a cheap way, but still tell a good story. So I think that's one of the gifts that comics can give.
Hey, Joshua, real quick. If they make a Hercules live action remake, do you have a fan casting for Hades?
Ooh.
No, I don't.
Okay.
If I were to have
Yeah.
my dream that I think it's one of those, like, it would just be funny to me, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
The guy who plays Dr. Cox in Scrubs, like, 'cause
Okay.
he has that, like, wide-eyed, and he could just talk
Nice.
really fast. I just think that would be amusing.
Yeah.
Or really, I don't think it would be a great casting or anything. I just think it'd be funny for me.
No, but that's original because I mean I see the go-to as Chris Pratt as Hercules and RDJ as Hades, but
Mm-mm.
I like original picks like that.
Did you see what why can't I think of his name now? Phil. Who's Phil? Famous guy.
DeVito?
Yeah, Danny
Yeah,
DeVito.
yeah.
They were asking him if he was gonna be in the live action. He's like, of course. So they were like, oh cool, you're gonna be back as Phil. I was like, no, sorry, I'm gonna be Hercules.
Are they
I
doing
love-
this?
I
Are they
love
making a
that.
live action? Is this
Yeah, they
something
are
that's
making a live action
Yeah,
Hercules.
I mean, they're gonna do them for most of them, and that one is, I think, very like because it's so mainstream for the '90s. It's one of the only ones they haven't touched.
It
which,
is
like,
their best movie.
yeah. I mean, that is one. I mean, yeah. I mean, I know this is a whole side conversation I could go on, but that is one. If they do it right, it would be right for a live action. But yeah. But I love Danny DeVito. The memes of him
He's
as
so
like
funny.
Hercules and Wolverine and everything. It'd be awesome.
Well, I know Joshua's love for Hercules, the soundtrack, the movie, and so them making to a live action. I know that's
The levels on Hercules.
making
Kingdom
Joshua
Hearts.
very nervous about that. But see, you said, Kevin, the side conversations. I know there's supposed to be a lightning round, but I feel like this time together we do this. It's kind of like us hanging out in the comic book store.
It is.
Where
Yeah,
you
yeah,
say,
yeah.
"Oh, what are you picking up today? Oh, this," and then you're like, "Oh, did you hear about this? Did you hear about that?" And before you know it, you're an hour-long conversation in the comic book store talking about all kinds of things. Like, "Oh man, I got to get to work." We talk this, so that's kind of where I see Comic Book Ketchup is us hanging out in the comic book store, talking about the things we're geeking out on, and that's what's fun about this, and hopefully other people can do it. Kevin, what's your lightning round pick? What do you lift up?
Well, so this is kind of sparked because I've been watching the Harley Quinn animated series, which it debuted initially on DC Universe back in the day. Which I'm one of the I guess few who had DC Universe when it was like its own streaming service, and I loved it. I wish it had lasted longer, but it was a glorious time. But a lot of original shows debuted on that time, and so I watched Harley Quinn some back then, and then I really liked it. I just hadn't got back to it in a while, so I've been going back to that. I'm on season 2. And so I've been going back to the Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor run from Rebirth, which is just a really great depiction of Harley Quinn. And I actually got to interview both of them at NC Comic Con a few years ago. One of my favorite panels I've ever done. They're just like for those who don't know, Palmiotti and Amanda Connor, they're a couple and they both work in comics and they both write and do art, and they're some of the nicest people you'll meet in the industry. Just had so much to say, and really their run had a prominent impact on the animated series. They created the character Cyborgman, who's this really old irreverent landlord, and and he's in the show. He's voiced by Jason Alexander, and so it's just like what I love about Harley Quinn in the modern age is of course she debuted as the Joker's girlfriend in the animated series, in the Batman animated series, and then became so popular that she made her way into the comics, and then of course all the movies, and has had such a prominent impact. But I like that they've really recognized her as her own character, and she's gotten away from being the Joker's girlfriend, and she's both kind of like villain and anti-hero. She kind of bridges that gap, and that's what I find really fascinating about her. People compare her to Deadpool a lot, but and there are definite similarities, particularly in the tone of the book, but and this one, but I still really see her as her own, because Deadpool was never a full-on villain, and Harley Quinn was, and and in many ways still is. She's never a definitive good guy, but but she bridges that gap, and that's what I really find fascinating about her. And they've done some really cool stuff with her in various mediums over the past few years. And this is one of my favorite runs. So if you've never checked it out, again, this is from the Rebirth era. So what was that? 2016, I think. So there's a bunch of volumes there you can check out. And then, and he kind of paved the way for the relationship between her and Poison Ivy. The art's fantastic. It's just really animated and bizarre and quirky. So it's
interesting enough.
Actually,
when I was thinning out my comics, a lot of the Rebirth era has been thinned out. But I did find a couple issues of Harley Quinn, number 1 in Rebirth that you were talking about, and so I kept that in a box. So, Barbie Barbie played Harley Quinn. We have
Yep,
Margot Robbie.
yep,
You
yep.
know, and if you think comic books aren't important or they're just the funny books or a side thing, a lot of the movies and the TV shows and the things that we love about these superheroes come from these comics. And directors and actors will look to the original source material to get their tone, to get their ideas from. And so all of this is paving the way. It's the sandbox that the movie directors are looking to see what they want to tap into. So if you want to get to original kind of source to where these things are coming from, comics and graphic novels. Just what Kevin was talking about. Joshua, what were you going to say?
Yeah, no, I was going to say what's interesting. Their run kind of helps the show take off. Which, mind you, I don't like Harley Quinn in the movies that much, and that's why it took me so long to watch that show because I was like, Harley Quinn, great. But eventually, I watched it. I really liked it. I watched it earlier this year. I thought it was a great show. Yeah. And so the ones you're talking about started the show. The show inspires more comics, and that's kind of how this works, right? So the comics inspire a show or a movie, and then the movie is really popular, so the comics do something new with that, and they kind of bounce back off of each other, even though they're not telling the same story every time.
Right.
But the one that's going on right now, G. Willow Wilson, my favorite author, is writing Harley Quinn now, and I'm like, hey, you know what? I can get on board this Harley Quinn train.
How did I not know that? Is that how long has that been going?
We talked about this before.
She's writing Harley Quinn?
Or she already wrote it. One of the two. I just now reading them.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we did talk about it. That's how much there's a lot of good stuff out there. And sometimes even someone like me who's in the comic store every week sometimes misses stuff. So
I should also put as a discretion, like this era of the Harley Quinn comics are good for like teens and up. They're irreverent, but not quite as much. The show do not show around kids. Like it is a hard R-rated one. But like it's hilarious and it's like over the top violence and very cartoons and it's great for adults and like maybe like older teenagers. But yes, do want to put in direction. Do not show around kids.
She's doing Poison Ivy, which just happens to have Harley Quinn heavily featured.
Right,
that's what it is.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's why you wouldn't know.
All right, cool. Well, hey, my lightning round is no secret that I'm a huge Daniel Warren Johnson fan. He has been at the top of my list of creators in the comic book business for the last few years, and I'm kind of catching up with his old stuff. I kind of got turned on with his things when he was doing stuff with Marvel and DC and some of his new stuff, do a power bomb. But I forgot going through my comics again. I found Murder Falcon #1 that I just got the first issue, and I didn't keep up with it. I just kind of read that issue, didn't throw it aside. But then I went back and bought the graphic novel Murder Falcon by Daniel Warren Johnson, and it is an incredible story. Imagine heavy metal musicians battling kaiju monsters, and the only way that they could beat them is through the power of metal, man. And it is a very incredible action-packed story, but also weaved into this is this guy who is going through cancer and chemotherapy, and at the very end there's something that happens that I had a little tear running down my cheek as I finished writing this. So you would think heavy metal and rockers battling kaiju monsters from another dimension, and you literally have a murder falcon, a falcon with a robotic arm, battling these monsters, and they're at the end a touching moment about like, where do I belong? Where do I heal? Why do I push people away when I'm hurting or not? How do I bring them back in? Friendship, bands, pulling bands together for a common purpose. All those themes are weaved through this book. And by the time you get to the end, you're like, man, that was a heartwarming story in the midst of all this stuff. So I can't recommend that book enough. And yeah, you'll read the first couple of pages, like, this is bonkers. What in the world's going on here? But as you get through the middle of it and towards the end, you're like, oh, I see, that's where he was going. I see the bigger story Daniel's trying to share. And I'll share more about another book he's doing a little bit later on. But yeah, right. Murder Valley, it's a $19 graphic novel, $20 graphic novel. You can get paperback in anywhere you find books or online. And yeah, if you like graphic novel medium, go for that 100%.
Hey, Will, you said he's got a robotic arm. So can I?
Yes, you're Murder Falcon. There you go. That's it. Yes. Perfect. Very similar.
Oh, man. Yeah,
You're my hero. You're my superhero, Kevin.
I'm going to squeeze one more in, and Will's going to forgive me. Speaking of ones that are just really wacky, I was with Will in the comic book store, his comic book store, when I finally picked up I Hate Fairyland. Just because
good book. Yeah.
I just really like that author. I just have to share my bad opinion. I'm like, hey, and everybody loves this, and I don't get it. it's a little too wacky for me. But just because of his writing style, I'm like, I still need to know what happens next. So even though like the world isn't something that I'm like super enticed
Hmm.
by or anything, I'm like, the story, I gotta stick around for that. So
Yeah, Scotty Young.
that's where I'm
Scotty
at.
Young
Yeah, he's
is at the top.
incredible.
We met Scotty
We
Young at
met him. Yeah, that was
HeroCon.
great.
We met him, and he signed a couple of our books, and I think like you said, yeah, sometimes the worlds were like, that's not my favorite, but there's something about comic books, the final page, that if there's
Yeah.
good cliffhanger and you're like, man, I got to keep watching this. I found that way about TV shows. Sometimes I'm about to bow out on a TV show, but if they give a good cliffhanger to make me want to hit the next episode button on my streaming service, then
He's talking about
they're doing their
Lost.
job. Oh, Lost is
Lost
so
was
good.
the champion of that. Like I didn't even love the show, but I had to watch all of it. They
Yeah.
never give you a point where you can just walk away, really.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite shows ever. So that's another topic we can talk about since Spanky Gal at some
We
point.
need to one day.
Well, at Theology Beer Camp, we met a big time kind of movie critic, a TV critic who's writing a book about Lost, and he talked about Lost in our panel. And I was geeking out hard, so I can't wait for this book to come out about Lost itself. So maybe down the road we could get an interview with him on Systematic Ecology at some point to talk about Lost.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. There we go. All right, that's what that was not it, that storm. In and out. We start talking about one of these comics. We're going to keep going. That storm hung around, kind of like a slow moving hurricane. But here we go. Let's go to some of the main topics we want to talk about in terms of our comics. I'll go first because I don't think I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about it. It's Daniel Warren Johnson, no surprise, Transformers. Don't know if you guys are reading this or not, or have picked it up.
No. I haven't, but that's just because I don't care that much about Transformers.
You know what? I don't either, but it's Daniel Warren Johnson and his art and storytelling. And the Transformers, I did have other toys. I did have some of those toys when I was little, but I was getting a little older when they're coming around, so I didn't stick around with them a lot. And then when the animated series came on, I was more outside surfing and doing things like that than watching cartoons. So but I know the fan base for Transformers as a whole. And then we did an episode on the original movie and how much we love that. And it was a game changer in how we do movies and action and superheroes. It paved the way for superhero movies, I think. But this book is under the banner of the Energon universe that Robert Kirkman is creating through Image. And so he's tying in a brand new series called Void Rivals that I've talked about before, kind of this alien war that's going on, but interweaved in that shares the same universe as Transformers and as G.I. Joe. So you have this shared universe with Transformer, G.I. Joe, and this other property that Robert Kirkman is writing for. And Daniel Warren Johnson is brought in to take over the Transformers. And he's shared how much he grew up on Transformers and their movies and animated TV show. And it's one of the things he wanted to be a part of in his life. And so now he gets to write and draw and create. And the story is, again, it's robots and vehicles and smashing each other and doing wrestling moves on each other and blowing each other up. But in the midst of that, you have humans run around at their feet trying to survive. And so I think the larger story here is not only this war going on between factions of Decepticons and Autobots and all that, but you also have the humans in the midst of that with these warring machines. And so how are humans caught in the mix of the military industry complex? How do we wrestle with sentient robots? Some of that's underneath the surface in the midst of all the action. So it's fun. It creates a cliffhanger on every book. And so it's good. It's gonna be good. I think it is gonna be one of those, even if you don't care about Transformers, you can, once they're done with a first story arc, to grab the graphic novel and read it in one sitting. I think people have a lot of fun with it. And his art just unbelievable. His art, his sound effects, the coloring, out of this world.
Yeah, I could pick it up for the writer. Well, really, it would be because I know Will likes the writer, because I haven't quite got into his stuff that much yet. But I keep wanting to. I just can't decide what the first Daniel Warren Johnson comic I need to pick up is.
Do you like wrestling?
No.
I do think do a power bomb.
I know you've mentioned it so many times. I need to
I
pick it
know,
up.
and I like wrestling as a kid, but I'm not big into it. But I think the story behind it and the magic of it, and then the underlying thing, and then again, back in Genesis chapter 32, there's a reference that God's a wrestler. So there's just an Easter egg that may show up and do a power bomb. So I don't know. We're gonna talk about it soon. Fun. That's all from your transfer. I just want to lift that up. It's a cool ongoing series that's happening in comics right now, and it created a big buzz, and it's been sold out in all the comic stores. And so, every now and then comics get a little stale, and people are like, "Oh, what's going on, Batman? What's going on, Spider-Man?" They try to create events to create hype and get people out to the comic book stores. But what Robert Kirkman has done with this shared universe has really created a lot of buzz and a hype, and people are rushing to the stores to pick up these books. So anything that kind of keeps the comic book industry moving forward and doing fun stuff, I'm all for it. So they hooked me. I'm in there, and I'm not even a big GI Joe fan, but I can't wait to see how that is shared into this particular universe. I'm gonna pick up those books. It's amazing. Cool. Joshua, what do you have on your list? I see a couple there. What are you going to go for first? I can't wait to hear.
Let's talk about Azula and the Spirit Temple.
Oh.
It's a weird one. I actually haven't read any of the Avatar Last Airbender comics. This is the first one I picked up. And it's because as much as I want to get into them, because it's been so long, I'm like, I don't know where to start with any of these comics, anything like that. This is a one-shot graphic novel. It's not multiple issues that were compiled into a graphic novel. It was published as a graphic novel recently, I think back in November. Faith Aaron Hicks and Peter Wortman. And man, if you love the Avatar universe, you gotta pick this up. It brought so much back for me. It was like I jumped right back into this world right after everything that happened after the 3 seasons, and I was like, oh man, that's right. I love this world. The art pretty much the same as the show. It's great. But you get into this and you see Azula, who, is Zuko's sister, all of that stuff. She is leading a band of rebels against the Empire. Except, the Empire's good now because Zuko's over it, and the Empire's working with all the other empires to, have a world of peace, all this stuff. And Azula's still, no, the Fire Nation's the greatest. How dare we have peace? How dare we work with them? They're beneath us, all this kind of stuff. So she's leading this band of rebels to kind of put the Fire Nation back on top of the world where they're going to be the best ever, all this. Her old friends, Ty Lee, May, they all turned. They're on the Fire Nation side. They are this peace, everyone else has had a redemption arc except for Azula. So this is post the show. Everyone has their redemption arc except for her. So I'm thinking, oh, she's going to the Spirit Temple. We're going to have this great redemption arc. I'm so excited because you saw what happened with Zuko. Arguably the most profound, the deepest redemption arc on TV in my mind. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. His sister's finally going to have her moment. She has this. She encounters Ty Lee. They kind of have a fight. She loses. She's running off into the forest. Even our own team's like, hey, what if this isn't worth it anymore? What if we're losing people? And because she still has this mindset, because they lost one of their people, and they're like, well, we have to go back for her. She's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. That's one person. There's still 7 of us. Why would we go back? Right. So she's very much, thinking like that. The best for the clan, just all war stuff. They're not in war, really. They're just kind of causing some trouble for the Fire Nation, because how dare her brother be nice to other people? But she runs off into the forest and she finds a temple. And she kind of seeks shelter in there and runs into a creature. I'm just going to say it's a creature. It arguably could be the It from Stephen King. Not a very similar feeling. It's kind of creepy creature talking to her. They're interacting, and through her journey in the Spirit Temple, she's given everything she needs to change, everything she needs to have that redemption, right? Ty Lee shows up, and she's not sure, is this really Ty Lee, or is this the Spirit Temple playing a trick on me, right? And Ty Lee's trying to help her defeat all the things that the Spirit Temple's throwing at her so she can fight her way through. She keeps being flashed back to her own past, where she's having to deal with what caused her to be who she is. And she's struggling with her past. She's struggling with the fact that her friend is no longer on her side, that she's lost everything, that she has to admit that her brother is the one over it, even though she is stronger. He was stronger in a different way, and she has to figure out what all that is, and she's faced with all of it. She has to confront all of this. Eventually blows a hole through the wall of the temple, leaves, and you're just kind of left with the creature of the spirit temple going, I gave her everything. That was everything she needed to change. And she doesn't change.
Oh,
and it
so
was
I don't
like,
need to read the
oh
book
man,
anymore. Don't need to read the book. You got it.
guys, it killed me, and it made sense at the same time. And that's something that's like, as someone who does do a lot of like discipling and Christian stuff, and I care for other people, and I want everyone to find their best selves. I mean, it's hard because sometimes that's reality, right? Where you've given everybody everything they could, or God's given them everything, and you help them as much as possible. And at the end of the day, sometimes people just don't want to change, so they don't. And it's like, man,
Right.
that's a tough pill to swallow. Man, is that real? Man, was it deep? Was it the art cool? Everything was great. The fighting scenes were awesome. And yet, you're left with this nugget at the end where you're like, man, that's right. Not everybody will choose redemption. Everybody gets a chance, but
yeah, that's what I love about the dichotomy between Azula and Zuko, and it makes it so fascinating. And like, she has this ambition to become her father throughout the series, and and I'm glad. I mean, yeah, it's heartbreaking, but it's also, like you said, very grounded. And I just want to add too, this one sounds awesome. I'm definitely gonna pick it up. And then if there's any other Last Airbender comic to pick up, definitely go for The Search, which is the story about Zuko's mother and the mystery there. It's set right after the events of The Last Airbender, but that's still one of the biggest one. Written by Gene Luen Yang. That one is excellent.
I'm looking it up now.
Yeah.
See, again, we're in the comic book store talking comics. You're like, have you read this? You're like, no, what is that? Joshua's eyes just got big. If you don't know if you could see it through there, when Kevin dropped that recommendation there for him, he went, "Ooh, there you go."
More. Mother, like, that's exciting,
dude. It's one of the biggest mysteries they leave you with the show, because like it's like one of the biggest lines right in the season finale, the series finale. Zuko says, "Where's my mother?" And then they just leave it at that. But this is the full story there. It's so good.
I love that. Good stuff.
Guys, I gotta go to the comic book store. I'll see you guys later.
Yeah, he's out. He's gonna go get it. But yeah, again, comics, they have the single issues and the cliffhangers. They collect it in the trades, but sometimes these companies will drop just a full graphic novel on you to do that. And so, yeah, if you're a Last Airbender fan, they put a lot of short stories and stories out there to fill in the gaps. Again, they're not going to create a whole episode or animated story arc to put on TV. That costs a lot of money, so they'll drop it in comics and kind of fill in some things. And a lot of big TV shows and cartoons do that. They'll fill in with comics and graphic novels. So that's good, Josh.
Also, Kevin, Joshua, did you know that Dante Bosco and Janet Varney will be at GalaxyCon Raleigh next summer? So I'm definitely gonna meet them
now.
Yep. I know.
So Will, what are you doing for GalaxyCon? You playing a
I know. Usually GalaxyCon happens in July when I'm like doing camp stuff and run all over the place. There was a little bit of a Cold War between North Carolina Comic Con and GalaxyCon for moving in on territory, but I think they've resolved that Cold War. And I think Sienna is like, Ultimate Comics puts the table up and they promote their own Comic Con with it. So there's a little bit of bridge there, but I haven't made it to a GalaxyCon. It tends to be a little pricey for me. And then a lot of the big, big stars that they bring out, that's how they make money, charging for autographs and the lines. It's hard for me to stand in for a line for a long time and spend money for an autograph. But if there's someone you really want to meet, Hayden Christensen and others, then it's worth to go and get a picture and say, hey man, I just want to look you in the eye and say I love your work. That's totally worth it. So we'll see. We'll see what GalaxyCon and other cons will do. I know North Carolina Comic Con is not doing one in the spring, but they'll have another one next year in November. So Cincinnati College will be back at that one pretty soon. So fun stuff. All right, Kevin, what's your pick? Pick number one there. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'm going to discuss Fatale by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, which is a very dark noir. Anyone familiar with Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips know that they're one of the most dynamic teams in comics, and they primarily do film noir. And probably my favorite by them is The Fade Out which is a 3-part series that set in classic Hollywood, and it involves a screenwriter and a murder mystery and really this dissection of old Hollywood. And then Fatale is both a noir and a satire of the femme fatale concepts. Anyone who's familiar with film noir knows that the femme fatale is, like an essential element, but also has been really a cliche where it's this like dark, alluring woman who often lures the protagonist and wrecks their lives, and becomes this demonic force. And it's become like very much a cliche and is often like riddled with sexism and misogyny. And so Brubaker and Phillips in this book kind of put a twist on that and want to dissect that and satirize the whole thing. So there's this character named Josephine who is the femme fatale, and her story revolves around these 3 men. One is a guy who's investigating his late grandfather's death, who is a writer, and he uncovers this unpublished manuscript that links to Josephine. There's also an aging police officer, and then a married reporter who's happily married. And so this, but it's hard to get. I don't want to give away a lot of plot elements, but it combines noir with supernatural, and again, really satirizes this concept and breaks it down, and tries to put a spin on it. It's excellent. I'm just reading the first volume now, and I can't remember how much. I think maybe 5 or 6, but it's one of their very popular series. And if you've never read anything by Brubaker and Phillips, again, they're just one of the like, for background on Brubaker, he's the guy who did the Captain America run back in the early 2000s that brought back Bucky, created Winter Soldier, and then he had a famous Batman run. He's he got it's interesting because a lot of creators these days start more in indie creator-owned stuff, then go to DC and Marvel. He did the opposite, and he kind of started with some big heavy hitters at DC and Marvel. Then for the last well over a decade, he's been making creator-owned stuff. And again, they all, like, you may think like, oh, another Brubaker and Phillips noir, are they really going to be? Is really that original? And what I love about them is, they very much set their books in that genre, but they manage to do something different every time. And the writing is so succinct, the art is phenomenal. Another one of their big collaborators is Elizabeth Breitweiser, who I don't know if she worked on this or not, but she's their go-to colorist. And so the 3 of them work together really, and all 3 are just some of the top creators in comics. But this is for anyone who is into noir, into kind of classic Lovecraftian horror. This is definitely a book to pick up, and there's a lot of thematic material to unpack, and really rich characterization. And it can be this one can be a little complex at times, but and I do recommend reading their stuff in graphic novel format, because it's a little harder keeping up with it in serialized, because I would just forget stuff. And so I like reading the big volumes, and they're so cinematic and they play out like movies. And even in this one, they have like a prologue and then an interlude, just like you're watching a classic movie, and they have those intermissions. And so it's very much structured like that. So really love this one. I love that team. But Joshua, you were going to say something on this.
Oh yeah. I'm just, I am excited about this pick because it hasn't been until this year that I started getting into like following actual writers.
Yeah.
I've just kind of been doing like issues or runs that I like.
Yeah.
And Ed Brubaker's Captain America, your other pick, I'm not going to spoil it, and G. Willow Wilson's Miss Marvel. I've always said those are my top 3 comics of all time. And I'm like, oh, wait, why? The only one I haven't tried to follow is Ed Brubaker. So I'm like, oh, man, there's all this stuff that's not Captain America that he's done. And I'm like, this is going to be a fun, that's like my 2024. That's going to be what I'm geeking out on every episode when y'all ask for like months. It's going to be, well, right now I'm on this Ed Brubaker where
I will do a warning though. I'll do a warning. There's some books that I've recommended to Joshua that have been very wordy, and he's just like, I don't know if there's a lot of words and there. Ed Brubaker is very wordy, and there's a reason why I don't pick up, like you said, the single comic, because I would forget because it's so complex. really he benefits from the graphic novel format
Yeah.
because you can keep reading and stay engaged with one long story arc rather than
Good to
waiting a
know.
month for the next issue and you're like, what is this? Where are we going? Yeah, and I
I haven't
think
even
his
read his
story
Batman.
is fascinating because yeah, he started at Marvel and DC and kind of got burned. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
say that he created Winter Soldier and got no compensation when it made it big in the movies. I think they gave
Even
him
as
like,
he has a cameo in Winter Soldier, but he still made nothing from that.
yeah, it doesn't make money. They're like, it's our
Yeah.
property. And that's right. You're handling our characters. But, you know, in terms of residuals or whatever, he's not getting any money from that. And
Yeah.
they maybe acknowledge it. And they gave him like a free ticket for a red carpet to watch the movie for
Yeah.
free. Oh boy. So he was kind of like, you know what? Instead of writing for the big two, I'm going to do my own creator owned stuff and let that take off and make money, either doing that with my own books, right, and my own characters. And a lot of big time artists and creators have done that, like Robert Kirkman and others. It's fun writing for Marvel and DC, but you're playing with their characters. And why would I create a brand new villain for them when I could create that in my own work? And if it hot one day and made into a video game or animated series, I get the money, not Marvel and DC. So there's that little tension between those IPs and stuff. But yeah, Ed Brubaker, a fascinating writer and novelist and graphic novel form. So that's a good pick.
Yeah.
And there's a book. I was going to say real quick on that note about the compensation and everything and the issues he's out there. There's a book that him and Phillips did called Pulp, which is very much about that, where it's about a writer who is like getting screwed over by this publisher. And
I read that one.
That's excellent. Yeah.
And if that doesn't make you completely hate Marvel and DC and you still want to read their Marvel and DC stuff, I think one of the best succinct ways to follow Bucky Barnes' story from beginning to end, in my experience, the best one, if pick up Marvel's Ultimate Alliance on PlayStation like 2 or 3 or something. I forget exactly where you find it, but there's a disc that is the Winter Soldier disc. And you can play separate mini games, and it gives you a download of like all this different information as a shield file on Bucky Barnes. And you can read everything about his entire past. They give you some comic panels that you can look through, and you get to actually interact with the character and fight them. And it's a fun time. It's like a little side mini thing, but it's cool. Yeah,
cool.
That's very cool.
Well, we have. I'm going to circle back around. I'm going to go last with my pick. So I'm going to end on a certain holiday spirit. So we're going to have you guys do your second pick, and they're very similar character. I got to run out real fast. We're going to let you guys talk about Kevin's pick, and then I will be right back. You guys talk about Kevin's.
Sounds good.
All
yeah.
right, Kevin.
So Joshua, you and I both picked one of our favorite characters and different books, but I have the one that you're going to talk about as well, because I just got a big Humble bundle of Hellboy books. And so that's how I read this one. And yeah, Hellboy in Hell. Oh gosh, so good. That's
the other one I mentioned earlier. That's
one of your favorite comics of all time.
All time. Yeah.
It is just, it's excellent. And the story here is that Hellboy is dead. He goes to hell, and he interacts with all these different characters from his life. It gets into the origin of his father, his heritage, and it's just as funny and dark and surreal and adventurous as any other Hellboy comic. I don't know. My background with the character is I saw the Ron Perlman movie way back when in middle school. I still love both of those to this day. And then I got into the comics a little bit later, and the comics are, I think, very different from both movies, both like the Perlman and Guillermo del Toro ones, and then also the one with David Harbour from a few years ago. There's this really blend of like comedy, horror, supernatural. It just has a specific mood to it that Mike Mignola is so good at creating. And it's very prevalent here. And he even, like, what I love in this one is that he pulls quotes and, themes from like Christmas Carol and then Macbeth and, all these like different classic literature and mythology that he perfectly weaves into the narrative. But yeah, it's just what, I'm sure you can talk about this all day, but I loved it.
Yeah. No, I was trying to think of the name. There's another show that was out that kind of helped inspired Supernatural that was like Paranormal Detective. And it reminds me a
Okay.
lot of like what Hellboy's style usually is in comics.
Uh-huh.
Because typically, you know, there's some kind of mystery of, oh, we think it's a ghost, we think it's this, we think it's this, will you come investigate? And Hellboy worked with the BPRD, which I don't remember
Yeah.
exactly what that stands for.
Bureau for Paranormal Research and Defense.
Ah, there we go. A real fan. And it's just fun. They kind of go around. They do these like detective stuff. I think the movies really focus in on the fact that Hellboy is a little grunge, a little like
Yeah.
you know, very shotgun American kind of.
Right. Like,
which is where the
crap.
casting was great with
Yes.
that last movie. But yeah, I don't know. I like the detective feel a little bit better. And
Yeah.
it was interesting that somehow he's literally in the pits of hell fighting like Leviathan, Satan, all this stuff, and it still kind of had more of a detective feel than it did a man against the universe feel.
Because there's a mystery surrounding it, and again, I mentioned he's getting into his origin and like, you know, why all these demons are after him. So it very much captures the detective feel throughout.
Yeah. So I got to ask you, something happens in that comic that I find very interesting. I'd love your take on.
Okay.
Because I've heard other fans of the comics have different takes, you know, whatever. Whenever Hellboy is born, his mother is a human. She prays like the prayer of salvation, more or less, as he's being born, and he gets shot up to Earth. Do you think it was Mike Mignola's intent that because she was, you know, saved, that's why Hellboy doesn't stay in hell? Do you think that was the intent behind that kind of flashback?
That's nice. Honestly, I didn't think about it, but that does make sense now that I think about it. And like, you know, I mean, I do think that ties in thematically really well.
Yeah. That's why I always struggle with what to do with how he did that, because I'm like, I don't think it was an accident.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, because he's been building the mythology in the universe for years. I mean, this book came out, I think, in 2012, and you know, but I mean, I read like in the back, you know, some of his descriptions and notes and stuff, and like, I mean, he had been working on this one years before he put it together and it came out. So I think a decision like that is very intentional, but I like it though, and I think that makes a lot of sense.
Oh yeah, and I love the part where you're almost upset that the leaders of hell get defeated, because it's like, oh, hell is in chaos and it's even worse now, and you're like, ooh, should we leave hell alone?
Should we leave hell alone? There's your quote for this episode. Yeah, I think that's a pretty
welcome to systematic etiology.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I would. Yeah. So you've mentioned this before. Joshua is one of your favorite stories of all time, and then Kevin brings us up. I like the Hellboy character. I love his and he's got. I think Mike Mignola has done maybe the longest running character. I mean, this guy survived a long time, since the 90s, and he is just a fascinating character. I'm glad they've made some movies about it, but in terms of his one shots and graphic novels, the art, the mythology around it, heaven and hell, and good versus evil, heroes and villains. I mean, you can't get more complex nuance than this. And so, I love this character, and I need to pick up Hellboy in Hell, because you guys have talked about it a lot. I will hunt that graphic novel down.
Well, I also want to say to readers who, like, if you haven't read Hellboy before, this one is actually a good jumping on point, even though the character is dead at this point. So. The interesting thing is, like, the majority of Hellboy comics are short stories, and like they're loosely connected and stuff, but like you honestly don't even have to read them in one physical order. But Hellboy in Hell is an actual ongoing series that it's a very straight linear story. And at the very beginning, it gives you all the biographical information you need to understand the narrative. That's a really interesting thing. This is like one of his more ongoing ones, whereas the other books, they're collected in editions and everything, and that you can read them, great. But a lot of those are short stories.
Yeah. And there is a lot of text to page. You know, this is something I typically don't love, but in this, I think it's necessary. I think it works. And then what we were mentioning earlier, where a lot of Hellboy's characters that you see in the movie, it's still part of his character where he's kind of grunge. He's kind of like, oh, let's just go punch the thing, right? What I love about this particular series of comics is that doesn't work here. The whole thing is chaos is basically the enemy.
Yeah.
So someone who just wants to punch the bad guy, you're just feeding the chaos. Like, you're making it worse. So it's like, oh, just to see him have to confront that, it's great. I love it.
And that's the primordial challenge in Genesis chapter 1 too, right? That's where all things go. Chaos, God bringing order out of chaos. The primordial waters that are swirling around, and God speaks into it. I mean, that's what we've always wrestled with. All right, so in our own cultural and characters and a calendar, there's an emergence of, once Halloween is done, you move right into
Thanksgiving.
Christmas. No, Christmas.
The best
I know.
holiday.
I wish.
Who cares about Christmas?
I wish, but no. You go to Lowe's, you go to Target, you have Halloween stuff right next to Christmas. But we go from Halloween, Hellboy in Hell. Now you're moving into Hellboy into a Christmas special. There you go. So we're just moving right in.
It was their winter special, and I kept waiting on it to be Christmassy. It's really not. It's just snowy. There's a lot of snow. The main reason I bring this
when you mentioned this, I went back to my comic book store to try to buy the issue because I saw it on the shelves and didn't buy it. I bought another Christmas special we'll talk about here in a minute. But I went back and they were sold out. Then went to another comic store. They were sold out. I went to another comic store. They were sold out. This particular book is sold out. Maybe because people didn't think that people would care and bought low, just ordered a small amount, but I can't find it.
I didn't know it was coming out until, boom, I think it was last week. Hey, here's a new Hellboy winter special. I was like, what? And I was, because all Hellboy is this. It's a nice, cute little paranormal story. You can just read it. Not cute, but it's a nice, self-contained story. You can just kind of read them and be happy. Sometimes there's like 2 or 3 parts, but winter special, I was like, oh, this is going to be a standalone. This will be a nice read. It was a nice read, but man, it actually does connect to some other stuff that I wasn't even sure if it was canon. That now I'm like, oh, well, I guess that is definitely canon. Which, hey, shout out Ryan Doze if you're listening to this. I think you're going to love what they're making canon.
Okay.
So I'm reading this thing.
How's that for a teaser?
It starts off, they're in Iceland. So I already thought of Will. I was like, oh, yeah. Will likes Iceland.
I love it.
They kind of feed into the stereotype of Iceland is always snowy. But okay, cool, whatever. It's not. But in this, they're there. It's snowy. A giant cat has been terrorizing this town. A giant black cat. So Hellboy has to go investigate naturally because, that's what he does. He's a paranormal detective. He goes, he finds the cat, he tries to punch the cat. He ends up in like a pocket dimension kind of thing, surrounded by all these like dark creatures. This fight ensues and whoa. What's that in Hellboy's hand? There's some kind of figure of light that's kind of mimicking a hammer. Oh, that's right. Hellboy is the wielder of Mjolnir.
What?
And it's right there. It's right there. Flashback. They even had the little asterisk. Go see Hellboy, Bones of Giants. And it's like, wait a minute. We thought Mjolnir disappeared. Apparently, some part of it is still attached to him. And it comes out in this moment for him to defeat these bad guys. And you're like, wait, huh? I didn't think, because that's like a novel. The Bones of Giants wasn't like a comic or a graphic novel. No, it's a straight book. I had to listen to it in audiobook form. It was great. And that's why I was like, I'm not sure if this is canon. And then, whoa, okay, Hellboy still has Mjolnir of some sort. They're going to have to readdress this, I guess, because, what? He has Thor's hammer. He's talking about Thor in the middle of this battle. And you're like, oh, okay. Across the Bifrost, Hellboy's been listening to Ryan Doze, and he's ready to beat some bad guys in Iceland.
and that's Iceland's steeped in Norse mythology. That's where the Vikings went. That's where Thor resides, the land of fire and ice, because you have the ice, the glaciers, but you also have volcanoes, eruptions. One might just happen right now, and then you have waterfalls. It's a very mythical, incredible place. And Hellboy there, tapping in some Norse mythology, grabbing the hammer. That sounds incredible. Man, I wish I'd pitched that up. Maybe they'll find me a second printing or.
Hey, well, I saved you. Look at the link I just dropped in the chat. That's the Hellboy Humble Bundle. So if you want to get these digitally, it's right there. And it's still going on. So that, you can get a bunch of books there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And honestly, it was just a lot of fun. At the end, he's with the girl and, they're drinking some hot tea or hot chocolate or something. It's a hot beverage, right? And she basically pitches a new case to him that he's going to go check out. And it was like, oh, hey, winter special. That was it. And the thing I'm stuck on is there's that moment that's like Captain America in Endgame where he's holding Mjolnir, except for it's Hellboy and there is no Thor. So he's basically the only wielder. And you're like, Okay. Does
worthy.
Hellboy just possess the power of Thor? Is he gonna sudden like what's
worthy.
gonna happen now? Yeah.
Sounds like he's worthy.
I
Sounds
can't
like
wait to
he's
see where
worthy.
it goes. It's great. And for those who don't know and are listening, Hellboy, this is completely separate from Marvel. These Norse gods are very much more like the original mythology. So if you haven't checked out that novel, yeah, go get Hellboy Bones of Giants. It's also fantastic.
Yeah, I mean Norse gods isn't necessarily IP for Marvel. It's in the public domain. So you even have a story arc of Wonder Woman not too long ago meeting up the Norse gods and meeting Thor. He doesn't look like Thor from the Marvel superhero comics, but it's a different kind of red-headed, red beard Thor, which probably that might have been the case in terms of how the Vikings saw him. So public domain, so anybody can play around with mythological creatures and gods. So good stuff,
including systematic ecology. We're gonna be doing an episode on Norse and Greek gods very soon as the finale to our annual theme of cosmologies.
Man, how's that for a teaser? How's that for a teaser, y'all? Stay tuned. All right, we're gonna wrap this up with one more comic, and it is the season of holiday specials and holiday movies and winter specials and all those. Well, as I was walking in a comic store picking up from my pull list. You want to check out my pull list or shorts I put on YouTube and Instagram. You want to check those out. I pick a favorite one. Well, I chose, here we go. There you go. Yeah. Oh, Silent Night with a K. I looked and saw, Dan Mora, one of my favorite artists of the day, did a cover for Batman Santa Claus, Silent Night with a K. Yeah. It's a DC Christmas holiday special. In this episode, in this issue, in this story arc, there happens to be vampire man bats flying around attacking people. Batman shows up with Robin and a couple other family from of course he's brought in to help save the day. Well, off panel, one of these man bat vampire creatures gets shot with a wooden stake through its chest. You're like, whoa, who's coming to help out? You turn the page and there is Mr. Claus, Klaus, on the back of Prancer. With Prancer has these glowing eyes and all muscular, and he and Claus, old Santa, Saint Nick, is sitting on the back of Prancer with a crossbow, ready to help fight these mythological creatures that he's fought before. He has a history with them, so he goes, here, let me help out. And then Batman and Claus start talking like they know each other, and Robin's like, wait a minute, you guys have a history? And he's like, yeah. We and Santa's like, all right. Remember that time we did this? And Batman's like, yeah, remember that time we did this? Yeah, oh, okay, yeah, we'll go back to the. And they're like, wait, you have a history with this guy? You guys have worked before? And like, oh yeah, we've worked before many times. And they're like, okay. So this whole story ends up going where they have a team up, Justice League, different people teaming up with Claus with trying to figure out what's going on with these creatures. And come to find out, Krampus shows up, right? Okay, that's the villain of the end. The Loki character, Krampus, that German monster that likes to eat naughty children around Christmas time, because that's a good thing. Yeah, Santa helps them out. If you're good, you get toys from Santa. If you're naughty, you're going to get devoured in the middle of the night. So very creepy German myth and fairy tale, but they're weaving in this story with this DC special. And what's cool about this comic is it's coming out weekly. So part 1 was last week, part 2 is this week, part 3 will be next week. So they're moving pretty fast through the season, and I'm sure they'll collect it in a volume. Art's good. You get a little backstory. It's not the old jolly red suited Santa from the Coke commercials. This is more of a Norwegian, Scandinavian woodworker. It's not even Saint Nick from like Christian heritage of patriarch of Saint Nicholas from Bishop of Myra in Turkey, where we get a lot of the myths around Santa Claus and gift giving and putting money in stockings, those kinds of things. Is a different kind of Claus and tradition there. But the fact that he's a hero, he's still a gift giver, a wonder worker, and teaming up with the Justice League to fight this villain and to bring Krampus back to his ways. Because you find out in issue 2 that Santa and Krampus actually have this kind of good cop, bad cop relationship where they go to these towns and Krampus is just there to scare the kids into doing right. And then Santa comes behind and says, well, hey, since you have some redemption there, let me give you like a cool toy or a doll. But Krampus goes bad, and literally instead of just scaring the kids, he's like, wait a minute, they think I'm some joke. No, I'm not just some joke anymore. I'm going to actually literally ban these children or eat these children. They're like, oh no, we got to stop Krampus and bring him back to his old ways of just being bad cop rather than, so it's a cool story. I think, you know, hold it loosely within the canon of the DC universe and Santa canon. You know, and then spoiler here, or just warning, if you have kids listening around with you and you have different Santa traditions, we don't want to spoil anything for kids or you guys. I know there's a diversity in how people feel about Santa and the traditions around that. So we might go into that a little bit now. So pause that. I don't have a lot of time, but Joshua and Kevin, what are there some Santa traditions that you grew up with? Was there a particular Santa tradition that you grew up with?
Well, first, I just want to mention, based off what you're saying, Batman and Santa's relationship sounds like very similar to the Doctor and Santa Claus's relationship. The Doctor does meet Santa Claus, and they kind of get a little. They work together. They know each other, but they get a little. Of course, you would do that.
Yeah,
you know, kind of.
Yeah,
so
there's a tension there.
That's a lot of fun. I love that. No, as far as like Santa Claus traditions, man, that's a great question. You know, the usual milk and cookies kind of stuff, but weirdly enough, I don't remember a ton from Santa. I know the biggest gifts always came from Santa, and sometimes for some reason he hid them in the closet and told my parents where to find it.
Nice.
So that I would think I opened all my presents, and then it was like, oh wait, Santa put one in there.
Yeah.
He just kind of scourged around, found some corners of the house, you know, normal Santa stuff. Yeah,
there you go. Yeah, you got to find that gift. Kevin, how about you?
Just the milk and cookies, and then, you know, they would be the first ones we would see before we would go to open everyone else's. So they would already be laid out under the tree before, and when we got up, and then we'd go see them every year and all that. But yeah, as I've gotten older, I like all the different interpretations and like looking at the origins from different countries and mythologies and stuff, and how the characters come to be. This book sounds awesome, and I also, the writer Jeff Parker, I interviewed him a few years ago as well, so he's also a really nice guy. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah.
Also, can I do a quick shout out?
Sure.
On our Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts, I recently published 2 of the Should It Be Canon episodes, and I do ask about the letters from Father Christmas, whether it should be canon or not. So check that out.
Nice.
Yeah. For me, we did the whole Santa thing, brought us gifts, and they were the ones who were not wrapped. And so we came down, and that's what we saw first. So whether it was a Millennium Falcon or a bike or a surfboard or whatever, they were all laid out there. And we did the milk and cookies and wrote a letter, you know, that kind of thing. We played around with you know, there was that kind of mythology of naughty or nice. If you're good, then Santa will be good to you, kind of as an incentive to be good all year long, because be good for goodness sake kind of thing. Over the years, we do the same with our girls, but as they got older, we leaned more into the story of actual Saint Nick. And so, you have Santa Claus of commercialism around the holidays and Christmas, but there's an origin story of Saint Nicholas from Myra, the bishop in Turkey. And so if you haven't read his story or gone into that, just go to Wikipedia page or a Catholic website or Orthodox website and read about the story of Saint Nick. He is a fascinating story. He was orphaned. His parents were wealthy, so inherited a lot of money. And what he would do is he would do secret gift giving to people who were poor, needed help. He would fund them. And the most famous one of this dad had daughters, and if you didn't have a dowry, this is in the 3rd century, 300s, that if you didn't have enough money and you couldn't marry your kids off, or especially the women, they would be forced to go into prostitution. So they were really close to putting his daughter into prostitution. And so, but you know, old Saint Nick put money in their stockings that were laid out to dry. And so that's where we get the stuffed stockings from. He funded them so they wouldn't have to do that. And he's a patron saint of sailors and travelers and doubters and children and gift giving and even brewers in some places. So there's even rumors that Saint Nicholas was at the Council of Nicaea And that there's even a legend that he punched Arius in the face for saying something wrong about Jesus. So not only is he gift giver and charity, but he's not afraid to punch a heretic. And so I think
break
that's
out of jail.
absolutely hilarious, which is in line with him teaming up with Batman and fighting evil. So I love that tradition around that. So if you have a problem with Santa or using it as like manipulating children or lying to children or whatever that is, you can lean harder into Saint Nick and the spirit of Saint Nicholas and Christmas of gift giving and focusing on the Christ child and what that means for the world. I think that's a cool tradition that we've done with our family. There's still a prayer of Saint Nicholas that we pray every Christmas Eve before we go to bed, and Christmas the next day. His feast day is December 6th, so it's a cool feast day and festival that a lot of Orthodox churches will celebrate. So look into that. If you're not feeling like traditional Santa, but you want to lean more into Saint Nicholas, explore that a little bit. It's a lot of fun.
Also, I just want to point out somebody, which we might do at some point, but watch Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and keep in mind Saint Nick's actual story. It is different, but there are a lot of nods to the real story with the stockings, with the gift giving, with the breaking out of jail with the reindeer, and you're like, oh, wait a minute. They made it Santa Claus, but they definitely leaned hard into Saint Nicholas's story, which was kind of cool.
And like any big figures, you have different takes and cultural perspectives on things. Like, even Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, Hellboy. There's stories when people get a hold of the story, want to reinterpret it for modern times or make it palatable to their culture or what they're trying to say. Santa's another one of those figures, and that's why I like to see him. He's my favorite superhero. I'll say, people, who's your favorite superhero? Saint Nick. I'm gonna do Saint Nick because man, he's got all the power list of supernatural abilities as much as Superman, and leans hard into the gift giving, charity, and the fact that he's patron saint of travelers and sailors tossed back and forth on the tempest of doubt. Man, I love that guy. Love it. And my middle name's Nicholas. So there you go.
Yeah, and if you follow Tolkien, he also fights goblins, and his best friend's a polar bear. It's great.
I need to read the Letters from Father Christmas. I need to read that. I need to find that
it's
too.
good. It's great. That
cool, y'all. We've gone a whole hour here talking about comics, and we could do it all day. Again, it's like walk to a comic store and saying, "Hey, this is what I'm reading. This is cool," and then they recommend you to go pull something else off the shelf, and then you read it and you come back and you talk about it with your friend. That's what the whole point of this is. As one of our favorite mediums of storytelling and engaging with stories. You out there, if you're not collecting comics and you want a recommendation of a graphic novel or a comic book run, just to kind of dip your toe into this genre of storytelling, all three of us here would be happy to give you suggestions. So chime in on YouTube or Instagram or Discord and let us know what you're reading. Let us know what you want us to talk about, or if there's something we should look into, or if you just want some recommendations and looking for a direction to go and dive into comics. Be careful, because once you open up that Pandora's box, you really go deep like I've done. But
well worth it.
And any final thoughts?
Does Merry Christmas count as a final thought?
It sure does.
Well, Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. It's still Hanukkah right now.
Yeah. And I'll say Merry Advent, because we're in the season of Advent. We have 10 days left in Advent as we prepare for Christmas on December 24th. And then just to remind everybody, Christmas is a 12-day season that doesn't end on December 25th. There's 12 days of Christmas that lead up to January 6th, the day of Epiphany. Don't think of January 6th as Insurrection Day. No, think of it as the day that the wise men come to rebel against an oppressive government like Herod and give gifts to the Christ child and point to God doing greater things among all religions and all nations. Okay. Woo. All right. That's all.
On that note,
Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah.
Merry Christmas.
Kwanzaa. Something.
Yes, happy holidays.